Hello, everybody. My name is Coreena Forstner. I'm a rising senior at Eastern Michigan University studying psychology, criminology, and sociology. Today, I will be presenting my research on the cyclical nature of childhood adversity, substance use, antisocial behavior, and criminality. To give an overall synopsis of my presentation today, we'll be covering the origins of zero tolerance legislation in the United States as it relates to substance use, various mental health conditions, labeling theory, and lastly, adverse childhood experiences. For this literature review project, I used a multitude of online databases, which I accessed through Google Scholar and the EMU Halley Library. Some of these databases were PubMed, PsycArticles, Psychology and Behavioral Science Collection, and the Criminal Justice Database. In all, this project utilized 17 academic articles and studies. To begin, let's start with the origins and historical background of zero tolerance legislation. Prohibition was adopted as a constitutional ban of alcohol in the United States after the passing of the Volstead Act. This ban included the production, importation, transportation, and sale of alcoholic beverages from 1920 to 1933. It is important to note that this ban was ineffective in its original goal to decrease alcohol consumption in the United States and increase overall health. In return, according to Myron and Zwiebel, alcohol consumption rebounded to 60 to 70% of its initial value. It also unintentionally reversed the steady decline of serious crimes as the homicide rate in larger cities across the country increased from 5.6 to 8.4 per 100,000 people in the population. It also sparked the creation of organized crime associated with the illegal distribution and production of alcohol, as well as increased the rate of drug smuggling. However, before Prohibition, the Harrison Narcotics Tax Act, which according to Courtright, was a United States federal law that was designed to regulate the tax, importation, distribution, and use of opiates across the country. Its goal was to confront the increasing number of opium addictions by prosecuting unregistered narcotic dealers and keeping narcotic transactions only within legitimate medical channels. Zero tolerance laws and policies such as the two showed adverse effects. For example, the enforcement of such rigid and aggressive policies quickly shifted to what we know today as the war on drugs. It increased the number of the people who were labeled addicts, which has further perpetuated the addict to criminal pipeline. Looking through an intersectional lens, you can see how zero tolerance policies have heightened the scrutiny towards men of color who were mainly targeted by labeling them as socially deviant. As stated by Nickerson, labeling theory states that labeling someone as deviant or criminal may lead to change in their behavior or result in them acting out as what they have been labeled. These labels isolate individuals with substance use disorders and further push them towards criminality and away from any support programs within the community. Before we dive deeper, let's discuss some groundwork definitions that will come up later on in my presentation. According to the National Institute of Mental Health, substance use disorder is defined as a disorder that impacts a person's brain and behavior, leading to a person's inability to control their use of substances, whether they are legal or illegal. This includes drugs, alcohol, and medications. The World Health Organization defines addiction as a state of periodic or chronic intoxication that is detrimental to the individual and society. This is categorized by an overwhelming desire to consume the drug and to obtain it by any means, which also includes criminality. This can include a physical and/or psychological dependence for the substance. To relate drug usage to criminality, according to Miller and colleagues, 8 million property crimes and 5.4 million violent crimes committed in the United States in 1999 alone involved alcohol or other drug use. Data also shows that a large portion of violent crime is accompanied by alcohol usage. According to Friedel, many drug users may resort to committing a crime in order to obtain financial ability to support their addiction or to obtain the substance itself. There are many biological risk factors that may predispose them to criminality or criminal behavior, such as antisocial personality disorder. Another definition is antisocial personality disorder. An ASPD, as stated in the DSM-5, is a personality disorder that is long-standing, pervasive, inflexible, extreme patterns of behavior and inner experience that include an unstable positive sense of self and the inability to sustain close relationships. The last definition needed to complete the triangular nature of all of these components is that of adverse childhood experiences. ACEs are potentially traumatic events that occur within childhood, so anytime between 0 and 17 years of age. And examples can include substance misuse, physical or mental health problems in a caregiver, parental suicide, divorce, witnessing a parent endure physical abuse, parental incarceration, and or severe or consistent economic instability. A study conducted by Friedel and colleagues in the journal Addictive Behaviors found that their patients with a clinical diagnosis of antisocial personality disorder were more likely to be criminally active during their 2-decade follow-up. This study also showed that stimulants, which were mainly amphetamine, were associated with every subtype of crime that they were looking at. Opiates, mainly heroin, were associated with crimes of theft, fraud, and drug offenses, which were primarily committed in the acquisition of money for drugs. The study concluded that a valid diagnosis of ASPD could be made in relation to substance abusers. In a study conducted by Calkins and Keene, concluded that, quote, early childhood behavior problems are considered a risk factor for later antisocial behavior, and suggests that the mechanisms responsible for ongoing behavioral problems are to be found in the interactions between every early childhood functioning, particularly with respect to the regulation of arousal in the context in which the development of regulation is occurring, which is primarily within our family and peer relationships. But how does all of this relate back to childhood trauma? Children who experience adverse childhoods are more likely to suffer from substance use disorders in adulthood, along with other negative mental health outcomes. A study done by Dubé found that retrospective cohort study consisting of 8,613 adults showed that those who experienced 5 or more adverse events within their childhood were 7 to 10 times more likely to report illicit drug use and addiction. Another study done by Schilling and colleagues that looked at a lifetime exposure to a range of adverse events in the community sample of high school seniors, boys who reported experiencing adverse events within their childhood were seen to be likely to engage in antisocial behavior early on in their youth compared to girls who experienced similar adverse events. In their study, which looked at young adults from urban socioeconomically disadvantaged youth, found that childhood adversity shows a strong association to depressive symptoms, antisocial behavior, and drug use during adolescence. So in the grand scheme of things, we can see correlations between substance use and criminality, especially present in individuals who are diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. Though these studies have shown a correlation between substance use and criminal activity, society's perception of drug users increases the scrutiny from law enforcement and further pushes them away from support within their community while they are struggling with addiction. ACEs not only increase a childhood's influence for antisocial personality and antisocial behavior overall, which can later lead to criminality, but it also increases the child's likelihood of substance use in adulthood. In an article titled, "What Have ACEs Got to Do with Justice?" it is stated that ACEs have been linked to many crimogenic risks, which are factors that increase the likelihood of offending. These included substance use and alcohol abuse, deprivation, poor educational attainment, and mental health problems. They also state that prolonged exposure to stress or complex PTSD in childhood can disrupt the child's healthy brain development, which can lead to emotional and conduct problems in adolescence, such as risk-taking and criminal behaviors in adulthood. So in conclusion, factors like mental health crises, substance abuse due to coping, because of life's overwhelming events, so coping by self-medication, the negative effects of trauma, and the stigma that comes societally assigned labels all play a major role in the culmination of criminal activity. And the interconnectivity of all of these 5 components create a continuous cycle that contributes to behavior and results in addiction, criminality, social rejection, and antisocial personality. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your guys' time.